table to extend our dining room table well into the living room. Setting out each chair, each place card is a reminder of how lucky we are to be surrounded by people we love, a family by choice. This year it was just me, my wife, our kids, and my father. The regular dining room table had seats to spare. And I know for some of you, the guest list was even shorter. I knew setting the table was going to be a stark reminder of who was missing. There is no need to make place cards when everybody just sits at the same spot where they sit every night for dinner. I dreaded seeing those empty chairs at the table. I wondered if I would be able to find my gratitude at all. This has been a traumatic year for us all. For more than 6 months, we have been facing a threat on a scale many of us previously would have been unable to imagine. Trauma is a part of being human. Pain, loss, hardship, these are baked into the human experience. We cannot shut them out any more than we can stop the sun from setting. What is unique about this year is only that in some way we understand each other's trauma better because we all share in it. Some of us have it worse, others better, but we have all suffered. Though trauma is a shared experience, our response to it can be varied. Sometimes when hardship strikes, we are able to dust ourselves off and move on. We are shaped by the experience, but we are not dismantled by it. Other times, it does hold us back. Like a monster lurking who catches us and refuses to let go. Sometimes we spend months, years even, trying to crawl back to life. This is what psychologists call post-traumatic stress disorder. But in the last few decades, psychologists have started to study a third response. Sometimes people don't just survive trauma, but actually thrive. They grow and find new ways of understanding their world. They end up happier than before the experience. Psychologists call this post-traumatic growth, and it's a growing field of research. Now, I am not suggesting we must be happy about trauma because it helps us to grow. Most every person who experiences post-traumatic growth would tell you they would trade their newfound development in a second if it meant the memory of the trauma would also be erased. This is not about convincing ourselves that suffering is noble or part of some personalized divine plan. But when we are faced with trauma, perhaps there are tools we can use to nudge ourselves towards growth. Our matriarch Leah knew something about hardship. The Torah says that her eyes were weak. A midrash elaborates that they were tender from crying. Leah was stuck in a loveless marriage. She longed for the affection of her husband Jacob, but he barely noticed her. He was infatuated only with his second wife, Leah's younger sister Rachel. Leah's is a story of heartbreak. There's pathos in every verse. In this week's Torah portion, Vayetze, when she has her first son, a sign of blessing in the Torah, she says, Ki ra'ah Adonai be'oni. Now God has seen my plight. So she names him Ruvain, from ra'ah be'oni, sees my suffering. When she has her second son, she says, Ki shema Adonai, ki snu'ah anochi. God has heard that I am hated by my husband. So she names him Shimon, from shema snu'ah, heard that I am hated. When she has her third son, she says, Ata hapa'am yilaveh ishi eli. This time my husband will cling to me. So she names him Levi, from yilaveh, clinging. Each name for each boy is a broken-hearted prayer for God to relieve her pain. Her tragedy is overwhelming. But then, when her fourth son is born, something changes. She says, Hapa'am odeh et Adonai. This time I will thank God. So she names him Yehuda, from Odeh, thank. Suddenly, in spite of the pain, in spite of her heartbreak, she says, Hapa'am odeh et Adonai. This time I choose gratitude. It's an incredible turn. She goes from naming her sons after her pain to thanking God. The rabbis make this act even more radical. They say that in the history of the world, nobody had ever thanked God before Leah. Leah invented the very idea of gratitude. And the son she names for her gratitude, Judah, his name becomes our name, Judaism. As much as we are a people of the book, we are also a people of gratitude. But one is left to wonder, why did she even come up with this idea? Rashi says that she believed she had received more than her share. She had thought that she was only entitled to 3 sons, so when the 4th came along, she was overwhelmed with blessing and needed to express gratitude to their source. All her life she had pictured setting the table for 5, her husband, her 3 sons. Now, all of a sudden, she needed more seats at her table. One for her sister, who she never expected to share a husband with, to be sure, but now another, a 4th son. Maybe Leah had also looked across the table at Rachel and seen that it was not easy for her either. That she had Jacob's love but couldn't give him any children, while Leah had been lucky enough to give birth to 4. Suddenly, where before she only saw scarcity, only saw lacking and wanting, now she understood that there was, in fact, abundance. She suddenly sees herself as lucky and blessed, so she desires to thank God. Gratitude helps her to reset the table and choose a new outlook on the hardships of her life. Trauma is like an oppressive darkness that fills a room. Post-traumatic stress is when the darkness is so thick we cannot find the door handle, cannot make our way out. Gratitude is a choice we make in the room, like turning on a flashlight. It does not stop the darkness, it just means that we can see through it. We can notice our surroundings, and maybe we can find our way to the door. Leah's life does not get any easier after her gratitude moment, but she does have a new coping mechanism. Only then do we see her forge a new relationship with her sister built on empathy, something that before Judah's birth seemed impossible. A group of researchers at Tel Aviv University did a study of 522 Israeli teenagers from a town near the Gaza Strip who had been subject to a particularly frightening week of rocket attacks. The teens had spent most of 5 days in bomb shelters. 2.5 months after the attack, the researchers used a tool to measure their life satisfaction, positive and negative feelings, gratitude, and symptoms of PTSD. Perhaps not surprisingly, they found that life satisfaction, that is, happiness with their school, family, and prospects, was the strongest protection against post-traumatic stress. And they found that a feeling of gratitude was one of the most important factors in helping the teens feel satisfied with their lives. Teens who were able to find things to be grateful for were shielded, not from trauma, but from some of the most harmful psychological impacts of that trauma's fallout. When we are in the darkness, it can feel hard to find things for which to be grateful. But what this study and others like it suggest is that we might be able to invert this thinking. If we can find something, even the smallest thing to be grateful for, we might open up new possibilities. In the darkness, even the pinprick of light can be illuminating. Trauma makes us want to say, when I am happy again, then I will have things for which to be grateful. But we might endeavor instead to say, if I can find something about which I am grateful, it might help me to return to happiness. Too often, people experiencing trauma are told, just be grateful for what you have, or God does not close a door without opening a window. Some survivors hear this and feel like they are being asked to put on a brave face, a mask for the world that hides their pain. But this is not what I mean to say. Rather, I am proposing that gratitude is a radical choice that we can make, even, especially, in our darkest moments. It's about finding something, anything, even the tiniest thing to latch onto. God has closed that door and turned out the lights. So all I can do is look for something I can use to generate my own light. And I am proposing that with one light source we can find another, that eventually one bright spot becomes 2, 2 become 4, until finally you find you have forced open a window and crawled out into the daylight. Gratitude is not a vaccine against trauma. It will not prevent or shield us from pain. Rather, gratitude can be a balm, an antiseptic that allows us to recover and move forward. Gratitude is a key component of resilience, which is not a measure of how often or how far we fall, but rather how nimbly we are able to pick ourselves back up. As I was setting the table last night, I decided to be like Leah. I had to reset the table in my mind in a way so that there would be no empty seats. I wanted it to feel like we had the exact right number of people. I got out the antique Fiestaware napkin rings, of which there are only 4, and which I can never use when we entertain large parties. Where there might have been empty seats, that's where I put my new baby twins, literally right on the table, so that they became our centerpiece and obstructed our view of what we were missing. This new life that we are so lucky to have welcomed this year, we put at the literal and the figurative center of our Thanksgiving table so that we could focus on that. Gratitude is a practice, not a trait. We are not grateful by nature. We can teach our hearts to notice our blessings and our lips to say thank you. And in doing so, we can reset the table of our lives. Not everybody is as lucky as I am to have something as obvious to put on the center of their table as baby twins. But all of us can find something to place there, to reset our table so that we can begin to see what we have, even as we acknowledge what we have lost. And maybe through that we find joy. As Benedictine monk David Steindl writes, "The root of joy is gratefulness. It is not joy that makes us grateful, but gratitude that makes us joyful." As much as we joke that 2020 cannot end fast enough, and as much as we long to be together safely again, the trauma of this year is far from over. And when it ends, our lives' paths will continue towards other bumpy patches. May gratitude be a tool for all of us, the way we reset the table so that it is not full of empty seats, but just the right number of seats for whoever ever gathers around it. May gratitude help us to find hope when it seems lost, help us to find light when all is dark, and may that light illuminate for all of us a new way forward. Shabbat Shalom.